We have Dr. James Marshall here from Rockford University. Dr. Marshall, some of you are quite familiar with if you're in his course, has been teaching evolution for us since 2007. I'm going to let him tell you his pedigree of different colleges because I probably won't remember. But I am going to tell the story of, because I warned him I was going to, of this. You always hear like everything's a really small world. So both of us are REU supervisors, and we just actually finished our first, which is research experience for undergraduates, by the way, for those of you that don't know. We have little Thursday night meetings where the students get to talk to one another and introduce themselves and sometimes talk about where they came from or what towns they're from. It was at least a couple years after you had been here. One night we were sitting at an REU meeting, and for whatever reason, the REU students started talking about the high schools that they were from.
I think it was Doug's fault.
I think it was Doug's fault. And so it got to be James's turn, and he started, I'm from Arlington Heights, and I went to Prospect High School, and I looked at him and I said, shut up, you did not. And he said, yes, I did. I said, I went to Prospect High School. And I was like, what year did you graduate? He graduated in 1993. I graduated in 1994. Come to find out, we had like similar friend bases. We think we may have been at some social events together, but weren't really sure. How random is that? And then we've known each other and been working together for several years. So really small world, like it's just very strange. But James has been working with birds for, I'd say the majority of his, for 8 or 9 years. And he's been doing some really interesting long-term studies here on the islands, and that he's continuing with his REU. And I think that's what we're going to hear a little bit about today. Some, maybe? Some? Oh, this is from home? Well, without further ado, Dr. James Marshall.
Yeah, this is actually work, in some sense, I started when I was at Denison University, although it says I'm at Denison University. It's not, it's Rockford University. I'm back in Illinois. I did teach at Denison for 3 years, but I've been teaching at Rockford now for 5 years. And I started doing stuff with honeysuckle. If you're from Ohio, you know there's invasive, nasty bush honeysuckle everywhere. If you're like me and driven up to 315 there in Ohio, in Columbus, that lovely green understory, all honeysuckle. And it followed me or preceded me into Illinois. And so I continued some of the work I was doing there with honeysuckle here. But I'm going to start this talk by talking about a lucky encounter. One of the things that happens when you're doing science research is you have a project you're intending to do. And as Jeff was telling us earlier, there are some times when your work doesn't go well and you have to change things. Other times when you're doing work as you're doing your normal project, other things come up, unexpected things. And so this bird here, this is a golden-winged warbler, which is a relatively uncommon bird. It's in decline. It's a bird of conservation concern. There's a lot of grumbling about getting on the endangered species list of the threatened species from year to year. And on this day, this is September 2nd of this last year, I caught 6 of them at one of my study sites. It was a pretty good day. And that's when I took a picture of. That's a full adult male. I didn't take a picture of the next one.
Just kidding.
Every day. There we go. So this is the next golden wing I banded is this one. But that's not me. That's some dude in Nicaragua. I banded this. This is a bird I banded on September 2nd of 2014. It showed up January 25th in Nicaragua. To give you some perspective, I've banded almost 1,200 birds in this project. And that's the only one anyone else has ever found, other than me. It's a fairly rare event. I've banded several hundred birds up here. I've had one Baltimore Oriole show up in Veracruz, Mexico. That's it. This is a very rare occurrence. Scientifically, who cares? One bird in all the country doesn't matter much. But I can start talking about this bird. This got a lot of attention in Rockford because there's not much else to talk about in Rockford. But it gave an opportunity for us to talk about some conservation biology concerns. If you have an opportunity to talk about things, take advantage of it. So what they did, it's one bird. That little thing on the back is a geolocator. That bird's going off back to North America sometime, hopefully, in the spring. And if we're really lucky, they'll come back to this same place next winter. If they pull that thing off next winter, they'll know where that bird's been for the last year. Because when you have a young bird, you know where they're born, but they're not going back to where they're born. So the baby blackbirds that you're going to be chased by adult blackbirds defending around here, they're not coming back to this island. They're going who knows where. And so this is an opportunity, a very good one, not very long odds. It's long odds, but maybe, just maybe, that bird comes back. What is it about the golden-winged warbler we're all excited about? There we go. I'm going to talk about the golden-winged warbler itself for a little bit, and then transition into a discussion about conservation biology of neotropical migrants. Because, again, this is the opportunity. These are birds of concern. What do we know about the conservation of these birds? And that gets me then to honeysuckle, because if we're looking at particular parts of the annual cycle, they're going to encounter honeysuckle. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a different thing? We think it's bad because we were always told honeysuckle is awful. Is it bad for a golden-winged warbler? Who is it bad for? And we'll talk about some of the implications of that. So this is our golden-winged warbler. You saw the male. It's on one on, well, your right, my left. This is a female. Obviously, neither of those is one I caught. And this is the thing that annoys them in some sense. So we got the golden-winged warbler that's in trouble. I caught this bird the same day I caught the golden-winged. This is a blue-winged warbler. Same genus, much more aggressive, and has some difficulty identifying who's its own species when it comes to sex. So it breeds with its own kind, and it also breeds with golden-winged warblers, which results in, I'm going to learn eventually, these things. These are hybrid birds. So this is a Brewster's warbler. That's one version of a hybrid between a blue-wing and a golden-wing. And this is a Lawrence's warbler, another version. Now, if you're a blue-winged warbler and your population is fairly large, this is an incidental problem. But if you're a golden-winged warbler and you're already rare, I don't need hybrids. That's the problem, because what I end up doing is losing some of my population to these hybrids. And we see this in a couple of species in North America. Out in the Pacific Northwest, we have a hermit warbler and a Townsend's warbler, and the Townsend's warbler is doing the same thing to the hermit. So 500 years from now, there'll be blue-winged warblers and there'll be Townsend's warblers. We won't be having these in our field guides anymore. That's one of the problems. This is a field guide-like map of the range of the golden-winged warbler. It looks really nice. It looks like there should be a lot of them in Illinois, and Indiana, Ohio. This is where they actually are. You'll notice not in the Midwest anymore. And this is a population trend map. Guess what the red color means? Nothing good. You'll notice over most of its range, the golden-winged warbler is in massive decline. This is breeding range. So what's going on? Well, it likes early successional habitat. Now, back in the day, early successional habitat was part of the larger landscape matrix. It's early successional habitat. It doesn't stick around for a long period of time. That's what succession is all about. But when you have natural disturbance regimes, even in relatively established climax systems, you'll have patches that are early succession. And so back in the day, when there was a natural disturbance regime, the golden-winged warbler had habitat, and other birds like this, but had habitat on a fairly regular basis. Now, we up here are certainly familiar with the idea that habitats are declining, particularly things like wetland habitat. We know that's on the decline. If you're like me from the Midwest and from Illinois and places like that, you know prairie habitats in massive decline, especially tall grass prairie. What gets a lot less press is the decline in shrubland habitat. This is the look over the last 150 years or so. Here's our declining grasslands. Here's our declining wetlands. But shrublands are also massively on the decline, particularly in the northeastern United States. Agriculture has largely moved out except for some dairy farming. And we've had a replacement through succession by forest. Now, we usually like forest. If you're studying wood thrushes, forest is good. If you're studying an early successional species, however, lots and lots of forest eventually is telling a different kind of story. So if you're looking at something like a neotropical migrant, what do we mean by neotropical migrant? Well, it spends about 3 months up here and spends the rest of its life someplace else. Most of it in the tropics, and then places in between when it's migrating back and forth. So we've known since the 80s that we have a problem with neotropical migrants. There's been a focus since then on conserving birds on their breeding grounds, concerns about habitat loss and fragmentation, particularly in places like the Midwest, where we have, if you're driving up here from Columbus, what did you see? Corn, soybeans, corn. A little bitty woodlot with a deer stand. That's what the woodlots are for, deer stand. All of you left. little bitty patches, especially in the Midwest. And so we've known for a while, we've been working towards conserving on the breeding ground. Not long after that, it occurred to people as well that tropics are a problem. They're spending a lot of the year down in the tropics, and it's not like the forests are well preserved in the tropics either. So this place where this golden winged warbler was caught, here's another picture from that site. It's a combination of preserve and also shade tree coffee plantation. So we know, yes, we need to work on the breeding grounds, but these birds are spending more time on the wintering grounds, and we have to do conservation down there as well. It's recognizing that when you're conserving a species that moves between places, you have to account for both parts of the annual cycle. You have to protect both places. So things like shade tree coffee. One of the threats to cultural exports in a lot of the tropics are bananas and coffee. So when you see that shade-grown coffee, that's what they're trying to do. You can grow coffee in the open. You can grow it in the shade. If you grow it in the shade, you have more diversity in the system. That's all good. But it leaves out one piece that in the last probably 15 years or so we've been thinking about as well. Yes, they're breeding in, hopefully that still works. Yes, they're breeding up in North America. Yes, they're wintering in the tropics. But they have to get between those two places. And so if I'm a golden winged warbler migrating through the Midwest, this is what my landscape looks like. This is not early succession. This is agriculture. I'm looking for something like this. And you notice something like this is pretty limited in the landscape. And so if I'm conserving a species, I have to look at all parts of its annual cycle. And if it's one that migrates, I have to be concerned about where it breeds, where it winters, and the places it spends time in between. Now, if I'm something like a goose, like the horrible geese, well, these geese don't migrate, but let's pretend geese did actually migrate for a change. A lot of those bigger birds migrate all in one go. They get up and they go, and it's all in one shot, several days migration. Small songbirds, though, don't do that. They go a day at a time. So when the bird takes off, it's going to take off in the evening time. It's going to migrate all night long. As the sun comes up, it's going to look for some place like this to spend its day. Be safe, rest up, get food. It may spend a couple of days there. It may spend a week there, getting ready for the conditions to be right, have the right amount of fat to go. And so I need to have places where they can do that. Now, that gets into this question of, if I'm going to be in these little places, what's the quality of the little places? So you know what the woodlots are like in Ohio. They're full of great things like multiflora rose and honeysuckle and garlic mustard, your favorite. Okay? So the question then becomes, yes, I've got a patch. I've got a little forest patch. But for a migrant bird, is that forest patch worth anything? So that gets into my question I was asking with my project. Here's this amber honeysuckle that's present in a lot of places. Who's using it? Who's dispersing it? Is it a good thing for them? So we talk a little bit about the amber honeysuckle, talk a little bit about what birds do with amber honeysuckle, and then get into the actual study that I was doing. So here it is. Beautiful shrub. What are you talking about? Isn't it lovely? Spindly-looking shrub. It grows to about a meter, maybe 2 meters tall. And this is the amber honeysuckle. There are several. We've got Japanese honeysuckle, Tartar honeysuckle, amber honeysuckle. They're all exotic. They're all bush honeysuckle with similar growth form. This is amber honeysuckle. And this isn't quite the most accurate map. I'm here in Winnebago County, and trust me, it's there too. So, but still, in Illinois, it's concentrated in the northeast part of the state. Around May or so, it has these lovely flowers, attracts hummingbirds, smells good. You can pull out the stigma and get a little sweet taste. It's nice. And then later on in the fall, it gets these bright red, pretty berries, which linger until December. And this bird disperses. So this will attract birds, the right color to attract them. And these little seeds what they're dispersing. Now, again, if you've driven up down 315, in the springtime, you see this. Yay, green leaves, out before anything else is. We'll talk about why that's not necessarily a good thing. And then here's one of my study sites in the fall. You'll notice the leaves have all come off, but here's this lovely green understory here, this last remnant of green. Now, in the fall, that's not such a problem. But in the spring, having all this understory can be a problem for things like this. This is Jack in the Pulpit. Represents one of a number of understory plants we call spring ephemerals. These are all shade-intolerant species. Shade-intolerant forest species. Think about that for a minute. Shade-intolerant forest species. Trick is to grow and flower and set seed before the shade grows in. So they are out and they're blooming before the leaves come out in the trees. You see the problem? The honeysuckle puts its leaves out too early. And so these and my mayapple, one of my violets, trillium, and we like trillium in Ohio. Right? All of these are potentially outcompeted by this nasty honeysuckle stuff. The native shrub community, which leaves out at a more appropriate time, is also outcompeted. And in terms of birds, while we do have birds potentially feeding on these things, we know from Amanda Rodewald's work at Ohio State and her students while she was there that birds that nest in honeysuckle don't do very well. They like it. They shouldn't like it. So then the question becomes, okay, it's not good for the native shrubs. It's not good for the spring ephemerals. And it's not good for nesting birds. How about for the migrants? Can we get anything good out of honeysuckle? That's what we're looking at. Now, the problem with honeysuckle as food for birds is that honeysuckle berries are like this can of Coke. And I like Coke. It's very tasty. It's also very sweet. So are honeysuckle berries, full of sugar. That's good if you like sugary stuff. But most birds in migration don't really need sugary stuff. They need fatty fruit. And so honeysuckle is essentially junk food. It'll do in a pinch. But if you're looking to do long-distance migration, it's not really what you want. And this is why it's a problem. So this is a juvenile black-throated blue warbler. And this yellow spot here, that's fat. That's a hollow space. It's a furcum where the wishbone is in a bird. It's normally a hollow space. It fills with fat. And this bird is a butterball ready to go. And so all this fat loading up, that's what it uses as fuel for its overnight migration. It's going to use up a lot of that in that night of migration. So the next day, it needs more fat to fuel up on. So it's got to find food. And a bird like this hasn't been anywhere. Hasn't been to the new places it's going to. So it doesn't necessarily know where the good food is. I have to get to my wintering ground as soon as possible. I'm setting up a territory in that wintering ground for 5 or 6 months. And the better I do in my wintering territory, the earlier I can leave in the spring to get to next year's breeding territory. So there's a strong incentive to get down to where I'm going as fast as possible so I can get back up early next year. I can't spend a lot of time looking for food. Plus, when I'm looking for food, he's looking for me. So not only do I have things like the sharp-shinned hawk that are migrating along with me that find me tasty, but I have Cooper's hawks and other things that find me equally tasty as well. And unlike the residents who know where to hide, again, I've never been here. I don't know where the hiding spots are. If I'm bumbling around looking for food, I'm going to be much more obvious for a predator to get. There's strong incentive to go quickly, which means while I'd like you, who's talking about optimal foraging theory? Optimal foraging theory, that's what we're doing here too, right? I should want the best quality food. But I may not be able to get the best quality food if I don't know where they are, and I'm likely to be the best quality food. So, contrast that with a resident bird. You're all here all year. They know where the good food is. And in September and October, when migration is mostly happening, I'm not under energetic stress. There's plenty of food. It's nice and warm in the overnight, and I know where food is. So I don't have to settle for crappy food. I can be picky, unlike the migrant bird. We generally assume birds are going to make the best quality choices they can. If I'm a resident, that means honeysuckle, which is a fairly low-quality food. I don't need it. But if I'm a migrant bird, although I'd like to avoid honeysuckle, I might be more likely to. And so when I look at the birds I'm catching, I expect to find that the migrant birds have been consuming honeysuckle more often than have the resident birds. All right, that means going out and catching birds. I'm very fond of mist nets. I try and keep Doug at them as much as I can. We're banding tomorrow, Doug, so look at it. And here, this is what we're doing. We're putting out nets, catching birds. I'm working in Rockford, or around Rockford. One site down here to the southwest of Rockford, Severs and Dells Nature Center. And then on the mighty Rockford University campus, which has some woodlot just to the north of it. So here's Severs and Dells. And I'm working in this section down here. We get there early in the morning, just like we do around here. Put up lots of nets, wait for birds to come in. We do the same thing on campus. So I live in this building most of the year at Star Science. And I had, I had these nets stolen from me this past fall. Oh, that was kind of irritating. Please don't steal my nets while I'm here. And here's this is Christina. she's pulling a water thrush out of the net. So we take the birds out of the net, and we put them in a bag. Sometimes for a little while, we're waiting for them to poop. Take a fecal sample, and these are the berries, and these are the seeds, and sometimes the berries pass through so fast you get actually berries in them. That's what we're looking for. In the fecal sample, do we see evidence of honeysuckle consumption? It's not necessarily the most glamorous work, but it's actually pretty easy. Sometimes you don't have to get really complicated. Sometimes science is actually pretty easy. It takes a lot of time, but the actual experiment itself can be pretty easy. So as I said, almost 1,200 birds, almost 70 species. How many of them have honeysuckle? 137. That's about 12%. So most birds are doing a pretty good job avoiding this crap. Question is, who is it that's actually feeding on it? So you have to have a bird talk. You have to have some pictures of birds. I have broken them into three groups. There are the migrants. These are things that are either passing through entirely, so I know they're in migratory condition, or they're arriving. So there are some birds that are coming from north, and they're going to winter in the Rockford area, but when they arrive, they're in migratory condition. So I've got kinglets. This is a very angry ruby-crowned kinglet. And golden crown, the other one. These are my thrushes. These are very common migrants. This is a Swainson's thrush, which dominates migration periods. They basically divide into two groups of birds that come through. There's a set that comes through early, late August into September. And there's a set that comes through into October and November. And the hermit thrush here represents that second. And as we'll see, these guys are pretty important when it comes to honeysuckle. Yellow-rumped warblers are also a fairly well-known fruit-eating bird, although we didn't catch a lot of them last year, but they're coming through. Ovenbirds are warblers from the early fed, and they don't eat a whole lot of fruit. And so this represents a lot of warblers that are going to come through in September, where there's still enough insects. I don't necessarily expect them to be eating a lot of fruit, but we'll see. And these are some of my incoming, right? So a lot of white-throated sparrows coming through in October, most of them passing through a fuel stag, and then many of you are probably familiar with the juncos. They're coming to winter in our neck of the woods. Summer residents are a trickier business. There are a lot of birds that breed in the Rockford area. And then in September and October, they get ready and they go. So, for example, this gray catbird. If I catch it on September 2nd, along with those blue-winged and golden-winged warblers, it's probably still in molt phase. It's not ready to migrate. When I catch that same bird in October, he's in migration phase. He's getting ready to go. And so he's going to start behaving much more like my migrant than like my resident. So I have to, when I start grouping these things together, I throw in my summer residents in with the migrants, because most of the ones I catch are in that category. So something like a robin, for example. I catch most of my robins in October. I'm not catching many Illinois robins for the most part. I'm catching Wisconsin and Minnesota robins. And maybe an occasional stray from Michigan, although we don't speak of them around here. Sorry. I have to. Chef's here. I have to. Then my residents, right? The birds that are here year-round. So this is a tricky one. This is a cedar waxwing. I have cedar waxwings around all year in Rockford. There's a good chance that they're not Illinois waxwings. More of those pesky Michigan, Canada, Minnesota, and Wisconsin ones. But they don't come with middle name tag and say, "Hi, I'm from Wisconsin. Ask me about it." So I have to make some decisions. And I'm going to show you a set of graphs in which I count these as residents, some of them as residents, and all as migrants. And then we'll talk a bit about other tricks with waxwings a bit later. These are more typical residents. I know these guys are sticking around year-round. So I got tufted titmouse over here, and this is a black-capped chickadee. We get black-caps up there, too. And our state bird, your state bird, all our state birds. It's hard to So here's the big table of numbers. Here are my residents up here, and my top three residents don't bother with honeysuckle. No, thank you. But then there's this waxwing who seems to love it. That's why I got an asterisk. Is it a resident, is it a migrant? Come back to that. My summer residents, a lot of the ones I catch are I'm catching later in the season. These are probably mostly migrants. And then here's my set of migrants, and notice here are my thrushes. And it's the thrushes, which are big-time frugivores, they're the ones who really can't stay away from the honeysuckle. So what does that look like graphically? I like graphs. So if I have waxwings as residents, waxwings, residents and migrants are both eating honeysuckle about equal rates. So much for my hypothesis. However, if I consider my waxwings to be a mix of residents and migrants, this becomes a significant difference statistically. And now migrants are consuming honeysuckle more often than our residents, as predicted. If I say all of my waxwings are from someplace else, then I don't have to do statistics. I can tell that's a significant difference. I do the statistics. It's still significant. But I have a question now about what waxwings count as. Back to that in a minute. There's also an interesting timing thing that goes on. And this helps me a bit with my waxwing question. So this is the days and the numbers of seeds. So this is my study time. And how many birds were captured with honeysuckle. You notice there's a peak here in the middle of September and another peak in late November. Who's responsible for this peak? Well, that's the Swainson thrushes. They love them, that honeysuckle. And they're mostly coming through here. This peak, that's my waxwing. Now, if these are resident birds, I should be catching them as much here as I do here. But I don't catch any waxwings, really, until this point in the season, which makes me suspect they're probably migrant. Without better information, I can't definitively say that. So one of the things, in addition to being able to give a good elevator speech and compel people, you also, when you actually write the paper, you've got to explain it in a way that the reviewers and critics are going to like. That's another way of massaging your story in a good way. So, what can we say then? If I'm a migrant bird, then I don't eat a lot of honeysuckle. Remember, my percentage, even among the migrants, is only about 12%. But I'm much more likely to be consuming it. And again, it's probably those constraints. I've got to get food. I've got to get to where I'm going. I've got to get there quickly. And so I can only turn up my nose at stuff for so long, my beak, I guess, before I have to start feeding on things like honeysuckle. If I'm a resident, at least as far as these are concerned, the cardinals, for example, I'm not eating honeysuckle, as I expected. But if you look at the literature that has looked at what cardinals eat, in the wintertime, they are eating honeysuckle. So what gives? Winter's a different beast. When I get into winter, number one, it's colder. And now I'm under an energetic stress I wasn't under earlier. Right? The migrants are under energetic stress early, but the residents didn't have to worry about it. When it's cold out, especially if I'm a chickadee, my one goal during the day is to eat enough food during the day that I don't freeze to death at night. And all that food that was abundant in September and October, a lot of it's gone now. But there's still honeysuckle left. And so if I'm under energetic stress, I may prefer to eat the honeysuckle. Not prefer, but I may choose to eat the honeysuckle because that's what's left. So I stopped doing banding in early November because there's only so much banding I can do. But the next step might be to start looking at some of these birds over the winter and see if they're actually eating honeysuckle at that point. What about those waxwings? Remember, for most of these birds, they want high lipid fruit. For part of that's physiological. Most birds don't have sucrase. That's the enzyme used to break down sucrose. And so for a lot of these birds, really sugary fruits are not very accessible. It's like eating iceberg lettuce. You can eat it, you don't get much out of it. A waxwing, though, is a year-round frugivorous bird, and it has sucrase. So it actually prefers something like honeysuckle, a high-sugar fruit. So this is the exception that proves the rule. For a waxwing, unlike all the other birds we looked at, honeysuckle may actually be a good fruit, and so maybe it should be eating honeysuckle, in which case I probably ought to pull it out of this whole data set to begin with. That's good news for me in terms of my statistics, because now I don't have to lump it in with the residents to figure that whole thing out. It's a whole different story now. So what do we do with honeysuckle? We know it's not very good for native shrubs, spring ephemerals, nesting birds. It can help some of my migrants, maybe, but it's not really the best choice for them. And if I want to get rid of it, when do I get rid of it? If I wait till the fall to cut it down, then I'm going to risk a bunch of things like thrushes spreading it around some more. So one of the places I work at Severson Dells, they've been cutting down honeysuckle. I put up a net in there, and I catch a bunch of birds that are crapping out honeysuckle seeds in that newly cleared spot. Oops. So when you want to cut it down, we can't cut it down in the summer because birds choose to nest in it. And there are rules about cutting down a shrub with a bird nest in it. So if you want to get rid of this and not risk more spread, spring's the best time to do it. You can do it in winter too, but slogging through the snow to cut down honeysuckle is two bad things at this point. What about my golden-winged warbler? Well, my warblers aren't really eating any honeysuckle. So as far as these woodlots are concerned, having honeysuckle in them is neither bad nor good for the warbler, which is a good thing. I don't have to manage the woodlots themselves for the golden-winged warbler. They're coming through, and they're doing just fine, as far as that habitat is concerned. So that's the good news. Honeysuckle's still evil. but not necessarily for these guys. So, thanks a bunch of folks. Jesse Hogue Morgenstern was the person I worked with at Denison when I got started. She was my student there. Christina and Lawton helped me the first year. She was my student, and he hung along for the ride. Tom Bartlett, many of you know Tom Bartlett. He's my banding mentor from here and the guy I band under on here. These are my students from Rockford now. This is Amanda, Sierra, and Laurel and Maya. Kuhn's family came out, helped most weeks with this family holding onto a black-capped chickadee. These are all folks who helped out. My kids help out a lot too. This is us standing in the greenhouse. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Advertise on there. Almost got some here. And these are other folks that have helped out over the years with funding. So, any questions?
You had mentioned that the yellow-winged warbler hybridizes with the blue-winged warbler. Are we also saying that the blue-winged warbler habitat is moving up as the yellow-winged habitat moves up?
What you're seeing, blue wings are so abundant that whatever habitat there is, they're a little bit less specific. They'll take, use habitat that's a little bit more disturbed, a little bit less conducive to gold wing. And so in addition to occupying some habitat they don't occupy, they eventually swamp out the gold wing habitat. So yeah, they're doing just fine, relatively speaking. Much better than gold wing.
Do you think that they're pushing the gold wings further up?
It's part of the problem. So we see the same thing as in the Pacific Northwest. We're seeing one species really genetically swamping out the other. We see this with mallards too. Mallards they're really abundant and they're really indiscriminate what they breed with. And so in places we have a rare or threatened duck species, one of the greatest threats is mallards. So that cosmopolitanization of the world that these hybrids are part of.
So, of the birds that were eating the honeysuckle berries, how many of those do you know of that have the enzyme?
Really only, as far as I know, only waxwings. It's a fairly rare enzyme in birds. Hummingbirds have it. And so a lot of, you put out a hummingbird feeder and most other birds, although potentially they could be drinking that, they don't because they really can't digest it very well. Hummingbirds are one of the few that have it. There are other species outside North America. Honey guides, other things that you get in nectar that have that, but not most of these birds.
James, how important do you think it is that your sites probably are in some pretty decent habitat? I'm guessing that those preserves, and then on campus those are pretty decent habitat.
Yeah, campus is crappy, but it's pretty marginal.
I was wondering how you felt like those woodlots might compare to those agricultural areas. Do you think you'd see a lot more feeding on the...
No, well, while Severson is a preserve, the understory in the large part, the part I'm working in is almost all honeysuckle, so I put the nest there. And the only thing that drives out the honeysuckle on campus is the buckthorn. So that's a story for another year.
Does it have anything to do with the Michigan connection?
Probably not. Probably not.
They were bringing the seeds down and depositing.
It's probably the badgers more than the It's all Big Ten problem.
How did the birds navigate at night?
Several different ways. There's a really cool study they did with indigo bunting, where they raised some indigo buntings in essentially a planetarium. And they were able then to manipulate the sky. They had normal sky, and they had a sky in which they rotated the sky around Betelgeuse. And so those young birds then, in the fall, when it's time to migrate, the ones that were raised in the normal sky, they hopped south in the opposite direction of a fixed point in the sky. The ones that were raised under the Betelgeuse sky were oriented away from Betelgeuse and hopped that way. So one of the things that birds use to migrate is the only fixed point in the sky, they navigate by the stars. They can also navigate by magnetic field. And so the inclination of the Earth's magnetic field changes. A needle will point, how much it dips changes. And so birds can sense how the needle is dipping. They have appropriate magnetoreceptors associated with the brain. So they can also navigate by way of magnetic field. There are a couple different ways. They can also polarize light. You get polarized light bands on the horizon at sunrise and sunset, and that's a fixed point you can use to orient to take off. So there are a whole bunch of cues that birds can use when they're getting ready to go.
Pretty amazing.
amazing stuff. And if you're doing something like a monarch butterfly that goes during the day, also has a clock that keeps track of things, so they know time has passed. They can navigate by the sun, so they keep track of time, so they know, since the sun is moving, where they are and keep their direction while they're going. That's a butterfly.
This might be a simple question, but why do the neotropical birds leave the tropics at all?
So in the tropics, there's lots of food, but there are also lots of predators. And so it's very difficult to successfully raise offspring. When you get up here in the spring, a bunch of new vegetation, a whole bunch of insects. So if you get up here and you get there in that right time, you can very quickly raise young under less predation pressure. The cost is, I got to migrate a long-ass way to get up and back. And that can be a real challenge then. I'm trading off better nesting success for the lifetime cost. Probably lifetime reproductive success is about equal. That's the thought. Thanks.
Obviously, the yellow birds, I don't remember the names in particular, but obviously they're beautiful and unique. But do you think there's an ecological impact that goes higher up in the food chain to have those replaced with the new birds, the blue and
no, and in terms of those species, the blue and golden wing, it's just the one species of two. And although in terms of the hybridization, now the habitat loss or habitat change, that's an aesthetic choice and a moral choice. And so the world is changing. Do you like the way it's changing, or do you not like the way it's changing? And so that's, as opposed to like nutrients in the lake, where the microcystis can be quite hazardous to people's health. And so there's a in addition to whatever moral and aesthetic choices, there's a human health concern. You and I are not going to be changed by whether golden warblers are here, except I'll be sad. But in the larger sense, if we're making all these changes we like. If we don't like them, what are we going to do about them? And that's really where our decision-making starts. At least for me, that's the decision-making comes in. Do I like the changes?
Is there evidence, though, that they do kind of fill the same role in the ecosystem and that they're being preyed upon?
Yeah, you're not losing anything. If you remember, we talked about it in evolution the other day. Most of the energy in matter, for instance, is trying to switch into the system. So from an ecosystem perspective, it's a fairly minor component, but it's a pretty component.
When they migrate, they're, like the black ball, they fly at 21,000 feet. Is that about as high as they get?
Yeah, it depends on the species, but yeah, they're flying pretty high up, and we're not really sure why. There's some thought it's some regulatory, that with all that energy you're spending, to be up high reduces the amount of thermal regulation you're doing, and also bleeds off some of the excess heat. Other than that, it's still kind of open question of why, but yeah, they're moving that high.
Do these birds that you mentioned have secret enzymes? They're still eating berries. Why? They can't kind of.
Because most of the berries are eating actually high in lipids. They have, and it's interesting too, a bird like a wood thrush or a twin thrush. During the summertime, they're feeding mostly on insects, and they're feeding their offspring insects, as high protein food. They switch over to fruit in migration time, and to do that switch, they actually change their gut physiology. And so the enzymes they use actually will change. And so they'll switch over from a protein-based diet and digestive system to a lipid-based one. That's pretty, and most of the berries they feed on, if you go to places where there are a lot of berry fruit, the viburnums and so forth, tend to be high lipid fruit. So this mixed in, it's a fruit, yes, but it's not really wonderful.
So they're not able to distinguish between a lipid-rich.
They might be able to, but and there's some evidence here, just 12%. There's some discrimination going on, but there's not, especially when you have a whole layer of honeysuckle. It's honeysuckle or so I'll say honeysuckle.
Is it unhealthy for them?
In the sense that it takes you longer to get ready to move your next stage because you're getting less out of it.
If you wanted to try to, in your yard with your planting, do something that was beneficial for the migratory birds, what would you suggest that you plant? You mentioned viburnums.
Viburnum is the one that most of the folks who would suggest that, and the folks who do migration work on the East Coast, viburnum is the big one that a lot of the birds plant, native viburnum. There's some other exotic viburnums that may not be as good. Barberries are pretty good. Wax myrtle is a good one. There are several potentially high energy foods that they are particularly regular. So you have, that sharp-shinned hawk is a migrant too. And so some of your accipiters are moving through. But you're also, there'll be Cooper's hawks that are resident, and potentially to get more south, will be sharp-shinned that are resident too. So you have both a migrating predator community that needs food and a native predator community that's also looking for food. So you get hit by both. It's interesting, you see migrating raptors, like I used to go to Derby Hill in New York, and you see a bird go flying by with a massive bowl and crop. Yeah, I got it. Any questions? Oh, did you have a question?
I
also have a question.
Nope.
Is the hybridization a recent threat to this?
I don't know how long they've been boosters for. I think the problem is, as the golden wing declines, it's not so much that maybe a recent threat as much as it is a more pressing threat. They may have hybridized for a long time, but when one becomes rare, that's when the greatest threat to the species. Now we pay more attention to it. It's also, as a birder, it's really cool. You see these really weird warblers, and hey, look at that. No, go ahead.
Are the offspring like in ruler?
That's what I was going to
That's a good, that I
that.
don't know. I suspect they probably are, or what's more likely the case is that the females are probably less fertile than the males. So that's how they can bird and bird. And as you get farther along, you have more hybridization occurring, it probably is. So I don't actually know for sure how easily they are.
I thought the birds were pretty similar, like they're when choosing a mate. Is the song different or?
Well, some is different enough. The problem is, at least, I don't know much about what the track is here, but in the town, in hermit warbler system, towns are really, the males are really aggressive, and females prefer an aggressive mate. And so they're given a choice between hermit and really aggressive towns, and they go with the really aggressive towns. There's a trait that's useful. Unfortunately, it's a trait on the
Even though the coloring is not what they're.
Yep. So they're basically, it's similar to ecological trap where you're choosing something, an ecological component based on the wrong criteria, as it turns out. Aggressiveness is probably a good trait. Unfortunately, aggressiveness in the wrong species. And so it's an evolutionary trap.
So it means that more, for us,
You get going both directions, but far more blue-winged males to gold. And it's certainly true. That's certainly true in the town. One more question, maybe?
So what's your proposal for like the solution? The agriculture problem, things cycles already naturalized and so similar. Like how do you fix that? Besides less agriculture?
I don't think agriculture is not so much a problem. In terms of what's going on with honeysuckle, it's not an agricultural problem. That's I've got a little bitty woodlot that's prone to invasion. So if I've got a place like peach and elk, for example, I want it to be more of a native system. So I got to spend a lot of energy getting garlic, mustard, multiple rows, honeysuckle out, and potentially reintroducing native species. But the question of I've got a habitat patch or a reserve that I want, how am I going to manage it? What sort of techniques am I going to use to manage it? And then if I'm going to do these management techniques, when do I do it? When are they going to have to bring this back?
Thank you.
We'll obviously be around for the next several weeks, so if you guys think of more questions, obviously pick his brain at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or in between. So, let's take a 5-minute break, and then let's be back up here about 5 to 8, and we'll get started with the guest lecture for the evening.
Everybody's coming back tonight.
Okay, sure, I'll do that. And thanks, Jeff, for a very nice introduction, for pointing out all the luminaries in the room. Now I'm scared to say much of anything here, the expertise level in here, but flattering to be asked by Jeff to come up here. I haven't been on Gibraltar Island for a long time. Great golden wing presentation, too. That's a bird near and dear to my heart. I wish I had it in this talk, but I took killer photos of a golden wing warbler in northern Michigan. in May, pulling a big juicy caterpillar out of a Septarian honeysuckle, non-native. But it's the only good use of a honeysuckle I ever saw, really. So normally they wouldn't do that. I got into biology and birds, through birds, which is a common conduit for a lot of people when I was a little kid, 6 years old. So I've been in this forever. That led to a career in botany for most of my professional career with the Department of Natural Resources, but it always came around to birds for me. I'm into everything. You're going to see this. This is going to be a little, hopefully not disjointed, but we're going to touch on a lot of things. Conservation is the common theme here, though, because we should all strive for that. You know, we got to protect this stuff, and that's what this is about. But in 2010, it was 2004, my Birds of Ohio book came out, and that put me on the Division of Wildlife's radar. I was with a different division, and it's been great. It's been a great ride ever since. You know, we do a lot of cool stuff there, and I really, really enjoy working there.
Jim, why don't you say something also about your birding trail guide that's out, because students can buy that here.
Oh, yeah. We, well, thanks to Jeff's help, we, through Ohio Sea Grant, published the Lake Erie Birding Trail Guidebook, which covers all the best birding spots all the way from Ashtabula, Ohio, over to the Oak Openings by Toledo. It's done very well. It's about to go into the second printing now, and that's been out a year, so available at fine bookstores everywhere. Okay, on we go. Let's see. Do I have to do anything special here? I'll get out of the camera's way. You're supposed to stand. Yeah, here we go. Good. Okay, well, off we go. Most of what I'm going to share with you are recent conservation stories. Everything will have a conservation message in it. I put this together for the EPA and gave a talk to them. And then have given this a couple times since, always modifying it. But since we're on a rock in Lake Erie right now, we'll talk about Lake Erie briefly. The last 2 winters, as you all know, have been brutal up here. Major ice cover, like we haven't seen in a long time. This was 2 years ago at Avon Lake, over towards Cleveland, the power plant there. They keep some water open out there because it's a warm water discharge from the power plant. So if you're into birds, this is great. You go there, everything's frozen solid. You have that open water just full of birds. But, you know, even when Lake Erie looks to be frozen, it really isn't. Even in a tough year, there's a lot of open gaps. However, this is what it looks like basically the last 2 years. It really did freeze almost completely solid. That's not typical for Lake Erie. I've done a lot of flying. We did a really lengthy 2-year transect-based bird survey using our aircraft. We have a little fleet of aircraft for the Division of Wildlife, and this is often what you see in the winter. Wind from the shore, it would look completely frozen. When you actually get out there and fly it like this, there's a lot of open gaps out there in the lake, even when it's really cold. That was not the case the last 2 winters. A lot of these leads and gaps, they just froze tight. But when there are gaps out in the lake like that, they're full of birds, ducks especially, certain kinds of ducks. Now, this is an avian frontier, really, in Ohio, because it's really hard to know what's on these big lakes, all of them. Lake Ontario, Michigan, Superior, Ontario, Erie, because it's hard to survey for what's out there. You have to use a plane, basically, and there isn't enough of this sort of work being done. So what happened is in the last 2 winters, especially the winter before last, 2 winters ago, it froze, and it froze solid. And we started to see this amazing response of birds to this. These are greater scaup. These are not lesser scaup. They look a lot alike if you're familiar with ducks, but these are a really, really hardy bird, and they winter on the Great Lakes in good numbers. That's about as far south as they get, generally, in the interior at least. And they were showing up everywhere in central Ohio. Anywhere there was open water to be found. This happened to a lesser degree this last winter as well. This is a tailwater of a dam in central Ohio that stays open, and greater scops all over. We normally do not see that at all. That's a rare bird in central Ohio. That's Deer Creek Reservoir south of Columbus. But it got better. We got this huge incursion of white-winged scoters. Now, there's 3 scoter species in North America. And not all Scoters are made alike, all right? The others are the black Scoter and the surf Scoter. Well, the white-winged Scoter is the deep diver. These things routinely forage at depths of up to 150 feet down, okay? Now remember, what's the average depth of Lake Erie? Any takers? 62 feet across the whole, average of the lake. It's a shallow lake. Still, though, most diving ducks can't get down to the bottom routinely to feed on bivalves, zebra mussels in a lot of cases. White-winged Scoters can easily do that, though. But we really didn't know that many white-winged Scoters winter out on these open leads and iced over Lake Erie, till apparently they got forced off the lake the last 2 winters, and we've got a glimpse into how many white-winged Scoters must be out on that lake. That's speculation. A lot of proving needs to be done here. But then came the long-tailed ducks. This used to be known as the old squaw for the very loud mewing calls that the males give. It would have polar bear on its life list. You probably don't. That's how far north they nest. But we got inundated with long-tailed ducks. It was really spectacular. Fair amount last winter. The winter before, tons of them. They were all over the place. That was on Mosquito Creek Reservoir up in northeast Ohio. Long-tailed ducks have been caught in fishing nets 200 feet under the water. These things can really, really get down there. So for birds like the white-winged Scoter and the long-tailed duck, to winter in leads in Lake Erie where the depth might be 60 or 70 feet down, reach the bottom to get to the bivalves, it's not a problem for them. And apparently that's the source of all these birds when they got frozen off the lake. And we had no idea that all these were out there. And then finally, the redneck grebes came, okay? This happened a little bit later. Peak ice cover on the Great Lakes tends to be early March. And come early March, 2 winters ago, we got inundated with redneck grebes, which is normally a rare bird in Ohio as a migrant. These are just migrants. But we know that redneck grebes, they dive to great depths. They're feeding on fish, primarily, but they're also deep divers. I kept tally of the grebes because it was so fascinating 2 winters ago to see this. 257 birds that we knew of. There probably were redneck grebes in every single county at one point or another. Apparently, again, forced off the Great Lakes, but not Lake Erie in this case, probably. They were elsewhere. So these are the Great Lakes maxes of 3 of the last big ice events. There's March 2014 showing up there. And red is ice. I mean, these things are really slammed. Well, the redneck grebes, we know, they winter in big numbers on Georgian Bay, which is on the north side of Lake Huron, and Lake Ontario, which saw more ice than they'd seen in a long, long time. And what seems to have happened is that ice shelf went out so far in those areas that normally stay open that it just got too much for the grebes. They could no longer get to their prey sources in the somewhat more shallow waters, and we got them in big numbers. Richard Nixon did this talk. I didn't even know what I put in here, sorry. But the message here, though, that I think got a conservation implication is that we really do not know what birds are using these Great Lakes and what numbers in the wintertime. And they want to put a lot of big wind turbines out in Lake Erie and other Great Lakes. That could have problems for birds like this that are using the Great Lakes. So we need to learn a lot more about our own Great Lakes is the bottom line with that story. Anyway, this is a little more curious case here, but this really speaks to conservation in the big picture, what's happened in North America. It leads right up to something that's very much in the present. Richard Nixon, we all know who Nixon was. He's probably the most infamous president we've ever had because of Watergate. He's the only president to ever resign the office. We all know that story, at least of it, Watergate. He was, that's his name, 1969. He was elected in 1968 and then inaugurated on January 20th, 1969, and resigned in July of 1974 due to the Watergate scandal. So, it's stained his reputation, big time. But we're going to take another look at Nixon, and this involves 2 warblers, 2 birds. When he was a California congressman. He was very, very ambitious, aggressive, and by any accounting, from anyone who knew him, one of the smartest people in politics. This was a very bright guy. There's no two questions about it. Well, he was on what was called the House Un-American Activities Committee. This was in the height of communist fear. They were rooting, that existed mostly to root communists out of the fabric of American society, traders, and all this sort of thing, and Nixon was right in there doing this when they were approached by an individual, I'll show you in a second, who identified Alger Hiss as a spy, a communist sympathizer. Alger Hiss was a big shot in the State Department, right in the thick of where you would least want a spy to be in the fabric of the U.S. government. So this is big, that this guy would be identified as a spy. Well, here's the guy who did it. Whittaker Chambers was a known communist, an admitted communist. He was part of the American Communist Party, and then he was reformed. He gave up communism, and then started to tell the government about who was really in it, including Alger Hiss, the guy I just showed you. He was editor of Time magazine for a while, very bright guy, writer. So he's how Alger Hiss got on Nixon and the House Un-American Activities Committee's radar screen. Well, they're having trouble pinning this on proving that Alger Hiss really was a spy, in spite of Chambers' testimony that he was. So when they were in one of these committee meetings interviewing Whittaker Chambers, Nixon goes, does he have any weird hobbies, anything no one else would know about this guy that, they're looking for a link to catch him in a lie or something. And Whittaker Chambers goes, yes, they're amateur ornithologists, both he and his wife. They're fanatical about birds, bird watchers. This is pretty good. And then he goes, once he came into a Communist Party meeting, and he was raving about a Prothonotary Warbler, that bird, that they had seen on the banks of the Potomac River. Okay? Now, this is pretty good stuff here. So, they get Chambers, Hiss, the alleged spy, into another meeting, and they're grilling him about this, and they sort of, fumble into it like it's accident, you got any weird hobbies, Mr. Hiss? And he goes, he couldn't help himself. He goes, yes, birds, love them. I'm an ornithologist. And one of Nixon's committee members, John McDowell, goes, did you ever see a Prothonotary Warbler? He couldn't help himself. He goes, yes, I have, right on the banks of the Potomac. A link was made that this guy obviously knew Whittaker Chambers when he was in the Communist Party, and that's what did it, that one bird. So there's a headline from the day, Nixon, who wants his star to rise. This is a very ambitious guy. Now he's got a way to propel himself into the limelight, and it was this Alger Hiss case, which is a famous one, and they couldn't get Hiss on treason, but in part because of the Prothonotary link and other things as well. They got him on a perjury line. 3.5 years the guy served in prison. Very contentious case, still is to this day in certain quarters. But what the end result of that was, that started Nixon's rise. From a U.S. a congressman from California, got elected to the Senate. He was under both terms as VP for Eisenhower. Then he went back into private practice. 1968, he wins the presidency of the United States. This is how this happened. Okay, and then had to resign in July of '74 because of the Watergate scandal. So there we go. Now we got Nixon in, thanks in part to a warbler. Well, Nixon grew up in an era when pollution in this country was at its absolute worst. This is when there was no EPA, there were no checks and balances on emissions from power plant stacks, that sort of thing. If you lived in the Mahoning Valley of the Youngstown area, it would have looked like that. No one wants to live in that. It was a very grim time. Nixon saw this. This is when he's a child or young, growing up. 1952, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire for the first of about 13 times. It happened more than once. Now, that's a red flag if there ever was one. If you have environmental problems when your river catches on fire. And again, Nixon is very alert to what's going on in the country. He knows all this stuff is going on. Silent Spring, 1962, the year I was born, this iconic book comes out that really elevated people's awareness of pesticide problems in this case. Again, environmental issues that are not being addressed. Rachel Carson was a big one to bring that out to the limelight. And finally, this is the famous one, 1969, the Cuyahoga River in downtown Cleveland, near where the flats are today, catches on fire again, and you got that. Well, people in this country had had enough of this. Remember, Nixon is now, that's the year he was inaugurated as president, when that caught on fire. So 1970, this was a real turning point in how Americans looked at pollution and their tolerance of this stuff that's going on. And Nixon is right there for it. You had this guy. None of you will remember this because you're too young. I feel old now. I do remember this as a little kid. But you had the crying Indian, this famous guy, Aspera Oscar de Corti. He was an Italian. He was a first generation from Italian immigrants that grew up in Louisiana. He had not a drop of Native American blood in his body. Played the part well, and he became such a symbol of the anti-pollution movement back then. And everyone is into this stuff and wants to see it happen. So that led to the first Earth Day, 1970, April 22nd. The date, that's the date that Richard Nixon died. That's the birth date of Vladimir Lenin, one of the greatest communists of all time. That's why, in my opinion, Earth Day and, by extension, the environmental movement probably still has a slight communist underpinning from the far right because of this stuff. Of course, it's just silly. It's all coincidence. But anyway, Gaylord Nelson was the one that really pushed this Earth Day, and they had it. April 22nd, 1970, the first one. New York City was the hub for this. 1 million people came into the city, mostly in Central Park, to celebrate this. But what this really is, this is a rising up of the masses. This is democracy in action. We've had enough of this pollution. We don't want our skies fouled anymore. We don't want the water pollution and all this stuff. And we won't stand for it anymore. That's the great thing about living in a democracy. You can do that. Well, Nixon, of course, is completely aware of all this. He's very in tune with the public mood, as all good politicians are. So in 1970, he signs the Environmental Protection Agency into being. That's Nixon that did this, the Watergate guy. And then he did not let the grass grow under his feet. In the first 2 years of his term, less than 2 years, he's done a lot of things. He's created the EPA. They've significantly strengthened the Clean Air Act, also the Clean Water Act. He launches into this pollution stuff with a vengeance. Some people are cynical and they go, well, he just did that because he knew that's what people wanted. That's a dumb thing to say. Who cares what the motivation is? Other people say, no, he really saw a lot of this pollution when he was a kid growing up. He didn't think that was right for his country. It does not matter. That's the guy that did a lot of this stuff. And that led to some real changes, profound changes, some of the most profound changes in our environment that anyone has ever made. That's a little statement from his State of the Union address in the 1970s where he says we will transform our land into what we want it to be. All those 1 million people in Central Park want this country to be. And they said about that, well, this gets into a modern-day story now. So that was just sort of setting the table as to how this environmental movement started, the modern one. Lichens were one of the beneficiaries of this in a big way. Of the big macroorganisms, lichens, a symbiotic organism of a fungus and an algae living together. You've all seen them. They're like crusts on trees, we'll call them. They are hypersensitive to sulfur dioxide pollutants from power plants, and they kill them in huge swaths. The Mahoning River Valley, you wouldn't have found a lichen anywhere in that valley when this pollution was at its worst. That's, by the way, a publication that we just came out with. The only hook and bullet agency, I'll guarantee, in the country to produce a publication on the lichens. And you can have that for free. We give those away to people. So the guy that we worked with, the main author of that lichen booklet, and one of the leading lichenologists anywhere, Ray Showman, who worked for American Electric Power, was hired to study lichens at the time when there weren't any lichens around those power plants, and he documented the cleaning up of the lichen community when the EPA made these companies put scrubbers in their smokestacks and reduce the emissions. But anyway, that's a statement from our booklet. And what Ray is saying there, you can read it yourself, but he's saying it's like nothing ever happened. It took decades, but the air quality is such now that the lichens are back to where they probably always were. So that's a good success. Now, you may not care about lichens at all, but they of course, lead to everything's interlinked, and they lead to something bigger. There's a really interesting photo in that that's the shovel with a big muskie. Okay, this thing could fit a couple school buses in it. Over the course of its existence from 1969 to about 1992, it moved more soil in southeastern Ohio than it would have taken to dig 3 Panama canals to get at the coal seams. Major part of that coal pollution back then, and now the lichens are growing on the tree where the shovel was kept taunting the shovel almost. They've come back. That's in Morgan County, Ohio, in Miners Memorial Park. Well, one of the most sensitive of these lichens, they're all sensitive to sulfur dioxide, but these little beard lichens, they look like little shrubs growing on trees. There's lots of different species. Some have really long beards, others are scruffy like this, but they're all looking basically like that. And they've come back with a vengeance, too. This is taken in Ohio. That was actually a new species that Ray and I found to the state in southern Ohio. Well, this gorgeous gem of a little warbler, this is the smallest warbler in eastern North America, the northern parula. It needs beard lichens. Has to have them. We know this because that's what they construct their nest with largely. They forage in beard lichens, and they're just intimately linked to those little lichens. And who wouldn't want that around? Well, the Ohio Breeding Bird Atlas was conducted for 6 years, the last one ending in 2011. The book documenting the results of the Breeding Bird Atlas for Ohio is going to come out later this year, and we picked the northern parula to grace the cover of this book, and there's a reason for that. That was the data from the very first Breeding Bird Atlas, which was done from 1982 to 87. Pretty sparse. Those dots represent where the parulas were found in Ohio at that time. It's a good bird, mostly southern Ohio. This is from the second Breeding Bird Atlas. No bird of the 200 species that bred in Ohio over the period of that atlas increased as much as this did, 380%. I was the author of this account, one of the co-authors of that book. So I got very familiar with this and the reasons for its recovery because of those little beard lichens, because of Nixon starting the EPA, making these polluters clean their act up, getting the sulfur dioxide out of the air, letting the lichens rebound. We got this cool little bird. There's no other explanation for this. So there you go. Nixon, there's a mess of Nixon was propelled in part, you could argue, into office by a little warbler, and then unbeknownst to him, he helped another warbler. It's a cool story. Anyway, this is why it's good to have environmental protections and EPAs running around. You want to live there? I mean, that's what China looks like in certain of its big cities where they do not have an EPA and no one is doing this. And good luck. That's not a healthy environment for parula warbler or a person to live. Last year they announced a $330 billion initiative in China just to clean water. This is just for rivers. That's the Yangtze River, what it looks like, to get rid of this stuff. This is the sort of hole you dig yourself into if you let things get bad enough pollution-wise. And no one wants that. $330 billion. Okay, look at that. That is the big agencies here in this country that do things for the environment, like the EPA, the Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, their collective budgets are $12.2 billion. That's it. That's 0.5% of the entire government's U.S. budget. That's not fair. We should have a bigger budget than that for the environment, but we don't. It still gets short shrift, and that's because people get complacent, in my opinion. This shows the history of U.S. EPA budgets, and you can see, back in the day, it was when things were bad, we put money into that. It gets better, cleans up, we start putting less money into that. It will be a yo-yo curve, would be my prediction over a long term. It will get worse. We'll put more money into that. and that chart will go up, it will fix it, and then et cetera, et cetera. Well, the Chinese are at the low end of the curve right now. They don't want to be there, just like we did in the 1970s. So anyway, environmentalists, if everyone says this to you, the right, I don't mean to be political, I shouldn't do this, but you will hear certain characters on radio and whatnot sort of paint environmentalists as bad. Maybe because of the Vladimir Lenin April 22nd thing, I really don't know why. Who would want to be that? A person who works to protect the natural world from pollution and other threats. Every person should be an environmentalist and be proud of it. That word should carry no stigma whatsoever, but it does in certain quarters. Anyway, Nixon's work with water quality and cleaning up, because our waterways got really polluted as well back then, and they've been cleaned up a lot. And this beautiful little fish, one of the little perches, the darters, really reflects that. There's a lot of other fishy examples of this, but there's the pre-1980 records. We go into the 1980s, move along a little bit, and more blue-breast darters are swimming around in more streams, and on it goes. And look at them, they've really, really recovered. This is probably reclamation of areas that they used to be in and got polluted out of, and they've come back. There's a lot of other fish that have done similar things. So there's where they are today, I think. So anyway, Richard Nixon, that's his role in some of this stuff that helped. Now I want to share some things that are really recent that we found in Ohio, or rediscovered in some cases, that are kind of neat. We own about 200 wildlife areas, I guess, in Ohio. No, about 140 wildlife areas, but we also have all these what we call wildlife production areas, and they're not as well explored or well known. This is the little one in Pickaway County near Circleville, Ohio, not a huge place. It's currently largely off the radar screen. No one really looked at it or did anything with it until 3 years ago, when a guy named Brian Riley, who's an excellent botanist, went in there just to look around, and he found this plant. Now, maybe only a botanist would love this. I don't know. It's kind of cool. It's a little parsley, the Eastern Yampa, Peritoridea. But this was considered extirpated in Ohio. No one had seen this plant since the 1930s, I believe it was. We thought it was gone. So he rediscovered it. And that's always cool when someone does that. There's a buddy of mine who showed it to me, Daniel Boone. What's his name? Daniel Boone. Claims to have direct lineage back to the original guy, but who knows. Anyway, he's a great botanist. So there he is, adding scale to this little parsley that we thought was long gone from Ohio, rediscovered. I guess it was 1950. I'm sorry. It was about 60 years since its last record, and it was from a farmer in Pickaway County, a legendary botanist, Floyd Bartley, who had found it originally, probably near where Riley rediscovered this. Well, Floyd Bartley, who originally discovered that plant that I just showed you, he also discovered a lot of other things that were rare plants in Ohio, including several things in this little prairie pothole that's just outside the Circleville city limits in Pickaway County, and it was just finally acquired. We wanted this to happen for at least almost 20 years, that this would get publicly protected, and it did finally as a state nature preserve by ODNR. And quite rightly, they named it the Bartley Preserve in honor of Floyd Bartley. But we need to do a lot more of that. Ohio ranks about 43rd in the whole of all 50 states in the amount of publicly owned land. Some would say 47, somewhere in there. We're way down on the list. Alaska's number 1. You might expect that. New York State, number 10. They really have done a magnificent job of protecting a lot of public space. Kansas is number 50, the least amount of public land. But we are not shining stars in this category at all. So the more places like that we can buy, the better. And it also protects a lot of places. By the way, that used to be known as Hitler Pond. That's a cemetery right down the road from it. We always called it Hitler Pond. They said, we can't name a nature preserve Hitler Pond. Let's talk about a stigma with a name. This is one of the major rare plants that is only known from that site in Ohio. Floyd Bartley discovered this, and it's still there to this day in that little prairie pothole wetland, the Rocky Mountain bulrush, state endangered species. There's the Bartley Preserve. And there's the little wildlife production area that I showed you with the rare parsley. But this area was all known, and still is the Pickaway Plains. Okay, about 5% of Ohio was prairie prior to European settlement, and we've destroyed 99.9% of all that prairie. It's really tragic in a way. So all this area, all the way down off the map and back up in a long linear swath was that Pickaway Plains prairie. So any little bit that can be protected in there is dynamite, and it's probably going to have unusual things like I just showed you. Hopefully someday we'll get a lot more of that area. Well, the same Brian Riley, who I told you discovered the parsley, who was a forester, by the way, he also found this plant. This was really exciting. This was just last year. And, of course, we all ran down to do it. And it's called Downy boneset is one of the names for it, Eupatorium pilosum. And there Brian is with his amazing find. And in the botany world, if you find a plant that's new to Ohio, no one's ever found, it's indisputably a native, which this is, it's great, great stuff. And that was found, or rough boneset, I'm sorry, I said the wrong common name, but this was found on Wayne National Forest property. The Wayne owns about 140,000 acres in Ohio, and it harbors lots and lots of rare things, and things we don't even know are out there. Even in a state like Ohio that's fairly well explored, every year, as you're going to see, new stuff comes to light, both in the animal world and in the plant world. It's hard to do. You have to be good, to make a find like that, but it still does occur. Because of how we've treated our habitats, and a lot of that's due to just simply clearing the land for agriculture, we haven't treated our plants well. There's about 1,800 plus native plants in Ohio, and a third of them are state-listed rare plants, either endangered or threatened or in the watch list category where we think they're declining. A third of all the plants in Ohio. So anytime something new is found, that's a good thing. Now this is another cute, cool little story. This is obviously a little caterpillar. It looks like it's wearing pajamas. And this was really, really exciting and telling in a way, and it speaks to our prairie past, okay? This little flower moth caterpillar, it's in the genus Shinia, which are the flower moths, are beautiful little things. I'll show you here in a second. But its fortunes are completely wedded to one species of plant called scurf pea, a little native pea, very pretty. Those are the purple flowers in the background, and it only eats that. That's really, really important when you think conservation and how animals interact with botany. All plants produce chemicals. A big reason they produce those chemicals, those are deterrents to herbivores. And in the herbivore department, it's not white-tailed deer or anything like that, caterpillars, number one. So some caterpillar species will always crack that chemical code of that plant and evolve the ability to assimilate those toxins to other animals. And this is one that has done that with this one plant. It turns out there's a whole suite of rare things eating this scurf pea. And there's the scurf pea, very pretty little plant. It seems like a super plant. Some plants are really, really good at producing crops of rare animals in the lepidopteran world, moths and butterflies that can only eat that plant. This appears to be one of them, but it's a prairie plant. I told you 99% of our prairie plus has been destroyed. That hasn't boded well for this plant. Or the little things that we don't even know are in those little prairies. So this caterpillar came to light, and it was a caterpillar that was discovered before its adult phase. The moth was discovered, and it turns out to be hyper finicky. It only hollows out and eats the fruits of the plant. It doesn't eat the leaves. There he is, Cottoniac, just vacuuming out the contents of the fruit. So after a while, you learn to tell if they're present or not, even if you don't see the caterpillar, by the little hollowed out fruits. So we know about this long before we really know what the moth is. And there's evidence of the fruit eaten. You know it's there, and there's the moth. Finally, these are one of the only pictures known of or taken of this moth in the wild. It doesn't have a name yet. The paper describing it and giving it a formal name is supposed to emerge this year. Again, in Ohio. This was southern Ohio, the edge of Appalachian, big preserve down by the Ohio River. Still finds to be made out there. There's the moth. The nut does not fall far from the tree with most moths. They hang right on. This would be called its host plant, what the caterpillar eats, host plant. And even as an adult moth, it nectars on that same host plant. It doesn't drift far from it. These things are really tightly wedded. So if you really want to protect biological diversity, it all starts with the plants. That's why I'm dwelling on that. Because the birds, golden wing warbler, whatever, they're eating caterpillars. Caterpillars are nature's little hot dogs running around. You don't want to ever come back. If you believe in karma, do not pick a caterpillar because your fate is to suffer a gruesome fate. Either, if you're lucky, quickly snatched up by a bird. If you're really unlucky, you'll be victimized by a parasitoid wasp and eaten alive by a voracious grub inside. This is not good. But this is all important. Now, this is the ecological web writ large. You have to have all these things going on to have what we enjoy today, which we're losing at an alarming rate. You've all read, I'm sure, if you're following the news, about the sixth extinction, which is getting a lot of press right now, and that's induced by people. Or, of course, the other ones weren't. Anyway, there's a little prairie patch in Adams County that has this scurfy and that rare little moth that hasn't been named yet, and it's caterpillars. So we looked around a little bit more. This is a little pioneer cemetery west of Columbus called Bigelow Cemetery State Nature Preserve, 1/2 acre. That's it. There were 385 square miles of this stuff at the time of European settlement, all gone. Turned from this stunning botanical diversity into a crop of 3, basically, wheat, corn, and soybeans. That's what we do. And found the moth, the little rare moth, still surviving in there on Scurfy. Little right-of-way not far from there. That was a railroad right-of-way. This is accidental conservation because it was a railroad right-of-way. They never plowed up to it. Plants are still there. The rare little moth was there. We didn't even know until a few years ago. One of its cohorts, another rare little moth that eats the Scurfy as well, this beautiful little coppery Orbexilum moth. It's in there too. We didn't even know that. That's a major rarity as well. Here's another little Adams County prairie owned by the Nature Conservancy. This is part of the Edge of Appalachia Preserve, which is now 18,000 acres in Adams County, Ohio, which is down across from Kentucky on the Ohio River. Absolute gold mines of biodiversity in here. Lots of rare species, truly rare species, not just in Ohio, and tremendous botanical diversity, spawning all these cool animals. We were in one of those last year, 2014, looking around. I was with some of my nerd nature friends, okay? We're into everything. So I'm looking at plants. We're looking for spiders, though, a special one. And I see this hole. I know what it is. I know what this has to be. It's a big hole. You could stick your thumb in this thing and never touch the sides. It's how big a diameter it is. And it's got this little grassy turret built around the edge. That's how I knew what it was. Okay? So we all, of course, descend on the hole. Now, I'm not kidding when I say my friends are nerds. David and Laura Hughes on the left, that's John Howard on the right, they have this piece of equipment called a borescope. This is what they stick up to do a colonoscopy, you know. It's got a little camera on the end. It's a flexible tube. They just happen to carry this around, you know. That's great. So we plumb that thing down in there, you know, because what we think is in the hole hides during the day. It's nocturnal. It comes out to the edge of that hole during the night, and there's the image on the screen. We can see 9 inches down into the bottom of the hole, and we are being looked at by this. If you're an arachnophobe, you won't like this. This huge spider. Let me see if this works. This is actual, at the time of discovery, wait.
So this is right by.
Okay, so this is a Carolina wolf spider.
We have to mark
Hiding in the bottom. This is a male. Females are bigger, of course, like all spiders. This thing would fill your entire palm sitting on it. I know. But here's why we're so excited. We thought this was gone from Ohio. The earliest accounts of spiders by arachnologists, this was the most common burrowing wolf spider in the state of Ohio. It was all over, probably every county at one point. No one had seen it in almost 60 years till we made that rediscovery. So we were naturally excited. There you go. That's a tube. I mean, this thing is, don't ever come back as a victim of a spider, because if you walk by that hole at night, your little bug, that thing roars out of there and whacks you. Not a good thing. There it is out. Again, this is a male. The females get considerably bigger than this. So this is really exciting. That made the media like you wouldn't believe. I write for a newspaper. I have a somewhat sense of what attracts media attention. Well, that attracted them. That thing went all over the place, but we're excited. Okay, here's the conservation message. What did that in, most likely, was agriculture. I hate to keep pointing a finger at that, but you can't plow up land like we've done in this state and expect burrowers in a shallow upper strata of soil to survive. They haven't. That was an area that was protected and never plowed. The reason the spider, whether you like the spider or not, is there is because they protected that a long time ago and prevented that fate from happening to it. But it's not just a spider. There are rare, endangered, and threatened species all around that spider living in that prairie. So it's an important thing. I think this is the one I want to end on, and this was another discovery of last year. A lot of us that are into birds are really into orthopterans. Okay, the orthopterans are the true singing insects. These are the katydids and crickets and coneheads and that sort of thing, that where the males fiddle with their wings. The classic soundscape of late summer and fall. We would all miss it if it wasn't there. And you hear them everywhere. Well, we're really into this because if you're into birds, it's fun to learn to recognize these, and it helps you become a much better birder. So anyway, we're on a caterpillar hunting trip, actually, late at night, about midnight, down in Adams County, and I hear this thing singing, and I go, it just wasn't right. So anyway, that is the first photograph. No, that's the common one. That's what I thought it was at first. I knew this. This is the most ornate song of any katydid. It's an incredibly long thing that can go on for like 15 seconds. Very hard to hear. You got to have good ears and hear high pitches to hear it. But it wasn't right. I go, man, that can't be this common virtuoso katydid. And I went over. It was a little bit of work. I crashed in where I've heard it, and they sing like birds. They get up on the top of a shrub and sing to advertise at night. And there's the first shot taken of this thing from the field, in situ, where we found the animal on its own terms. And anyway, it's a long story, but we collected some. We had to for DNA. We recorded it singing, which is important, in the field, and we housed some captives. We found several later. Turns out there's a population that's sizable in that one small area of Adams County, insofar as we know. So we have all the information. The bottom line, with this gorgeous little insect, it's really a pretty little thing. There it is, looking straight on. So we think at first it's this thing called the Cajun katydid. And that, as you might guess, would part to its Louisiana roots, Mississippi, down that part of the state where this is found. But it's not right. It apparently is a new species. Again, not far from that wolf spider was, in a protected area. Beautiful, charismatic insect that no one has ever sussed out and named. It's going to be named later. And if I have my way, it'll be named Ambocorypha ohioensis. At this point, we do not know it from any other state than Ohio, although it must be in Kentucky. But it's probably got a limited range. This is a group, in spite of these gorgeous sounds that they create with their wings, it wasn't until 2003 that this group got split up by a guy named Tom Walker in Florida. He's the expert. He's the guy that we sent all this to. He's the guy that said, you got something new. That's why we believe it. So Walker will probably end up naming it. But anyway, here's what he did. In 2003, he goes, there's stuff hiding in this complex. This happens a lot in biology, as you know, I'm sure. And that's what he divided up into 4 species. We think it's the Cajun eye up in the upper left, but it's not fitting. The song isn't right. We're looking at the recorded spectrograms and comparing them. They aren't matching up. Then Walker says, no, it isn't that. So that's why we have sort of a stamp on something new. And there the red star shows where we found the thing in southern Ohio. Yet this other new species in a group that's pretty well known that apparently is brand new and just undiscovered. Well, this is why, I guess, to wrap all this up with conservation, this is why this stuff's important. It's like Aldo Leopold said once, you don't want to destroy every piece of the puzzle, all the pieces of the puzzle till you know what the puzzle is. To badly paraphrase him. You really want to protect things on a big scale in every representative and figure out what we even have. We haven't done that even in this country. Imagine Ecuador or Colombia. How many things down there are yet to be discovered? So anyway, there's the edge of Appalachia Preserve, which is now 18,000 acres and growing. It sits just west of Shawnee State Forest, which is our biggest state forest in Ohio at 65,000 acres. The Nature Conservancy embarks on an ambitious project called the Sunshine Ridge Corridor, where they are connecting the two with a big, big corridor. You probably all learned about corridors and how important that is to have a pathway between habitats. When this is done, it's going to be 100,000 plus acres. There's nowhere else in Ohio you could ever do anything on this scale. And it still has lots and lots of secrets. So it's really good, I think, that we're protecting this before we wipe those secrets out, which we've undoubtedly done in much more developed parts of the Middle Western Prairie region. And that's it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jim. Questions for Jim?
Yes.
It's really good to get property. However, as you know, the money's getting tighter and tighter, and people that ought to be managing natural areas are not available anymore. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, John made a good point. If you didn't hear him, he said money's tighter and tighter to buy land. It's not cheap, and it always gets more expensive. And then the resources in the agencies that manage them, they're getting sparser as well. The latter point is definitely true. I don't know what to say about that. Here's a positive message, though, with that. Again, politics, you cannot keep it out of this stuff. But because of right-wing fears that Obama and his minions were going to take everyone's guns and ammo, remember this? You read about this? That spiked gun and ammo sales like you can't believe. That's the source of money for Pittman Robertson. That's what provides the Division of Wildlife's match for land acquisition. We're sitting on more PR money than we've ever had. It's great. Now we just got to spend it, you know. But so that is a shining light in the money issue. But you're exactly right. It is hard. But because of what I talked about, that's why I threw all that Nixonian stuff and the evolution of an ethic for environmentalism. People they're supporting the Nature Conservancy more now and raising more money. People they see what we've lost. If you go to Europe, it's really obvious there where they have lost a lot more. And people don't want that. And I think some of the sources of money are actually going up. The people that manage it, that's another issue. I don't have a good answer for that one.
Yes. Isn't it also then about space, that we still need this land for agriculture and for population? Because we're growing so fast?
Well, wonderful question. He basically said human population. Don't we need the land? I don't want to go off on any tangent here, but the 800-pound gorilla in every corner of every room that overarches any reasonable, rational discussion of conservation, in my opinion, is overpopulation. In 1795, you had to have 5,000 white males in Ohio to be considered a territory of the Western United States. Ohio hit that in 1795. We were given statehood in 1803. You all know this, I'm sure. And then we had a population of about 43,000 to 50,000 people in Ohio. Now it's 11.5 million. That's an astronomical increase in people, but that percentage of rise is pretty much true worldwide. You know, we're going to hit 10 billion people to 11 billion people, maybe in your lifetimes. I'm out, hopefully. But this is just going to put undue stress on all these things. That issue really, really needs intelligently addressed. You know, and it's a really hard one. It's a political untouchable, basically. But it's there, and your question got to that. Something to think about. Yes.
You place emphasis on how important it is that plant biodiversity supports the rest of biodiversity. So would you consider that efficient, target for protection in order to most efficiently allocate your funding to protect as many species as possible?
Yeah, I do, in a nutshell. He talked about the plant diversity, spawning, animal diversity. That's why I like that golden-winged warbler talk a lot, knowing that species well up where it's so common. But yes, absolutely. You could make a case in Ohio that on your argument there, a high priority for protection would be wetlands. At the time of settlement in Ohio, there were 5 million acres of wetlands. That was about 17% of the state's land mass. Today, there's less than 2% of wetlands. yet wetlands tend to be, on average, about 3 times richer in the biodiversity of plants and consequently animals. So I think you could make a compelling case that wetlands should rise to the top. But yes, absolutely. Places like that are already good, they have all this stuff, snap them up now. Because if you don't, they won't stay that way. We've seen that a lot. Yeah.
So being one of the foremost ornithological experts that you are,
you all hear that?
Yeah.
Is that on recorded? Okay.
You were talking about the northern Peru.
Yeah.
I hope I said that right. So you said it had a 300% increase, population increase back in Ohio. Do you think it's for the returning back, or for that is the community of Ohio?
No, good question, and that's a scientific question you would definitely want to answer with that issue. You mentioned the Parula warbler. I mentioned 380% increase, more than any other bird between the two bird atlases. Is it new? Is it something that's just coming into Ohio, or is it reclaiming? All the evidence points to its reclaiming former territory, where it was expunged from, probably by the loss of lichens in large part. We know that from historical ornithologists in Ohio and other states experience. Pennsylvania seen the exact same thing, meteoric increase in it, and all the evidence points towards a recolonization, not new. One more question, if anyone's got it.
Jim, thank you very much. Jim, Dr. Marshall, you've really set the bar high for speakers for the rest of the term. Thank you very much, both of you. For the students and anyone on the phone or on the webinar listening to this, next week the first talk will be Dr. Vandergood, who will be here talking about their walleye tagging work and understanding walleye movement in Lake Erie. And the second talk will be by Sandra Doyle-Ahern. Sandy was president of the Friends of Stone Lab. Both she and her husband, Mike Ahern, back-to-back in 95 and 96 during the centennial celebration of the Stone Laboratory when it was 100 years old. Sandy's now the president of EMH&T, the largest civil engineering, environmental engineering firm in the state. And she's going to have a great talk next week on merging environmental science, engineering, and leadership. I think you'll enjoy both of the talks next week. So again, thank you for coming. Jim, thank you very much. James, thank you very much, and I'll see everybody in 2 weeks. That was outstanding. That was